Hi, thanks for joining today. I'm Lisa Fligor. I'm a dietitian here at Tahoe Forest Health System. We work specifically out of the Center for Health, and we do lots of wellness programming and do different classes to support families, parents. Today we're going to talk about starting solids with infants. We do a live class for this, let's see, every other month. This is kind of a shortened version of it. It might be a little bit less personal, so I encourage you to reach out if you have questions. We do appointments with individuals, families, if you have questions or complications, and I'll have our contact info at the end. So I'm going to start by when do we even start solids. This is a super exciting time in baby's life, parent's life. I have 3 kids myself, and I remember they're all teenagers currently. They're all really good eaters. I like to share that as well. But when we started introducing solids, it's just a really fun time, especially I think the breastfeeding, formula feeding ends up being a lot on the mom responsibility. So this is a time too where we can get other adults, other caregivers involved in baby feeding, and it just can be really fun. So there's definitely been some changes, I'd say, in the last decade. Most, young parents or parents of young babies are kind of reading the current recommendations, but I just like to clarify that it's really recommended that we wait until 6 months old. Historically, they've recommended starting as young as like 4 months. So every baby develops a little bit differently, so there's some other cues that we're looking for, but in general, we really do want to wait until that 6 months. Their 6-month birthday. And then the developmental things that we're looking for is that they can hold their head upright comfortably. They can sit without support, so they're not like slouching down, or those bumbo seats where they kind of support their hips, so it kind of forces them to sit, but you want them to be able to sit without that, just in a high chair or just on the ground, that they can sit and hold their spine up. It's super important for like safety that they can do that. You'll also notice they're bringing everything to their mouth. So not just food, right, but toys, anything they can kind of get their hands on. That's their initial reaction. They're showing interest in your food. If you're eating around them, they're tracking you, they're following you, they're grabbing for it, leaning into it, really wanting to be involved. There's some great videos online. I'm not going to play them now just for the sake of time, but I do want to point out this 1000days.org is a great website for just different resources. They have a few videos on what to look for. It's helpful to watch a video because then you can actually see what this looks like instead of me just explaining it. So on their website, on their YouTube channel, they have a couple of videos that are really important. Another thing I want to point out too is that up until 6 months, baby's getting everything they need from breast milk or formula, and it's really important to wait till their digestive tract is developmentally ready for food. So we're going to talk about how to start solids. So a few tips. One, just be prepared for a mess. I think managing expectations is really helpful. I start with the cute little outfits you get, like at your baby shower or when they're newborns, that come with the little bib that coordinates with the onesie. Those are for drool and to look cute. Those aren't very helpful when we're start feeding solid foods. So I recommend going for something a little more effective. So I'm thinking more like the art smocks, where you get it covers your sleeves. It's almost like a mock turtleneck. That can be super helpful. It's the middle of winter right now, but if you happen to get to this stage during the summer, I loved putting my kids outside in a diaper on their high chair. It makes cleanup easier. I also recommend maybe getting a dog. I think I thought that was really gross before I had kids, but once you start feeding, all the help you can get, right? Another tip is, the more realistic tip maybe, is to put a clean tablecloth. Almost I like those oilcloths then you can get a smaller size of those and put that underneath the chair. That way, if baby throws something to the ground, you can pick it up and give it back to them. You know that's a clean surface, and we're cleaning that off between meals. Food or mealtime, starting solids, it's really meant to be fun and exploratory for babies. It's not a time to like pressure them to eat a certain amount of food. They're still going to be getting most of their nutrition from breast milk and formula. So this is meant to be more of an exploratory, like sensory process versus like pressure to get nutrients or calories in. I really recommend starting earlier in the day and not right before bed. A couple reasons: baby's energy and just the mood is probably going to be better for the most part. And then also when we start to introduce allergens, I want you to be able to kind of keep an eye on your baby for a couple hours after you introduce those foods. And so if you're doing that right before bed, it's harder to monitor that. You don't want to feed them when they're tired. I really like after that morning nap, if they're still taking that morning nap, is a great time. And then this sounds a little odd, but you don't really want to start them out when they're hungry. So I really recommend offering breast milk or formula first. It helps for me to think about, like, if I get super hungry and then I had to eat everything super slowly, or I couldn't quite get it to my mouth, I would just get really frustrated. So again, we're going back to, like, we want baby to be in a good mood. This is meant for them to be curious and explore food, explore the textures, explore the smells and tastes, and not be frustrated that they can't actually get a lot of food with their into their mouth. Ideally, we want adults and caregivers to eat with baby. So I get at 6 months old, when you're first introducing solids, that maybe feels a little bit weird and you're going to be eating slightly different foods. But in general, we want to start that habit of the family meal. We do want baby eating from your meal and what your family eats normally, and that we're not cooking necessarily a separate meal for baby and other family members. Always stay with your baby. I feel like that's kind of obvious, but in a busy life, I know it can be tempting to like run and throw some laundry in or whatever else is going on during your day, get on the work call, things like that. So just making sure you're there, you're present with the baby, and removing distractions. So trying not to be on your phone, having the TV on, all that things. Like mealtime is kind of mealtime, and it's a great time to start that habit right from the beginning. Okay, so getting in a little more details of how to start solids, we want to think of the end goal here. The end goal is for our babies to be competent eaters, to trust themselves with food and be able to nurse themselves well for the rest of their lives. So a very important skill. Baby needs to know that we trust them. They need to be in control. They get to take the lead. I kind of like this vision of like they're in the driver's seat on this, so that they can learn and go at their own pace. And they get a lot from knowing that you trust them. So if you're showing up with an agenda of like how much you want them to eat or what you want them to eat, it sends the signals, even at this age, that they should go off of what you think instead of what they think. And you really want them to be able to trust themselves, and you need to show them that you trust them by letting them, again, be in charge. So I love this picture because this is kind of what I mean by messy. So their skills are not there. They need to develop their skills. So you're going to have food everywhere. So again, just making space for that. Another thing I like to kind of share is this is totally a new thing for babies. Like all the new foods, all the new smells, all the new textures, they haven't been exposed to this. It can feel really uncomfortable. And so we really want to let baby be in control and be in charge of like how fast they want to move, what they're willing to try, what they're not willing to try. I realized my video just went off, and I'm not even sure if it's showing actually. I'm going to keep going. So my example is if you've ever traveled to another country where maybe the culture is really different from what you're used to, and you're offered food, or maybe you're out at a restaurant, you order something that you've never eaten. The feeling I get is like I'm a little skeptical. I'm a little bit nervous. I kind of want to go slow. I want to look at it. I maybe have questions. I want to touch it. I'm not going to shove the whole thing in my mouth. I'm going to take like some little bites and like go really slowly. So that's kind of every new food that you're offering to baby right now. And so you want to, again, let them be in charge of that. And we're not like shoving food in their mouth on our agenda. One thing I find really helpful so that baby can be in charge is giving them tools to communicate. So I find sign language very helpful. You can use it in other areas, but specifically around food, we can keep it super simple of what the signs that we use so that baby can communicate that since they're not speaking words at this point yet. So I have 5 signs that I like to use. The first one is hungry. You just take a C, and really you can make up any sign language that you want. You can make up your own signs for these words, but these are kind of the official sign language things, so it's just easy to use. So hungry is making a C shape. I might have to stand up a little bit. C shape with your hand and kind of going down your esophagus, like you're moving food from your throat down to your stomach. Food is we're going to take our hand and make a pinch with our thumb and our fingers, and then we're going to put that to our mouth. So this is food. The next one is more. And again, we're going to take both hands in that same pincher kind of position, and we're going to move them together like this. So I specifically remember my kids being like almost panicking when they were really hungry or they want more if they like something. All done is super important too. So I kind of call this like jazz hands, but we have open fingers like this, and then we just kind of shake them. So I also remember that being a very passionate sign for babies. When they're done or they don't like something, they're going to start doing this. Eventually, no will accompany that. And then in milk, I kind of regretted using this sign. I wish I had made up a different one, but the actual sign for milk is kind of like you're milking a cow. And so that's fine when they're 6 months old. But if you're nursing after 12 months old, had my kids come up to me in public, like doing that. It's like a tiny bit uncomfortable, but totally fine, obviously. But those are like the official signs. So I find that really helpful. And then as far as teaching your baby these signs, find it really helpful to do in the moment when you would use them. You want to say the word with it. You want to sit kind of directly across from them, make eye contact with them, say the word out loud. So like hungry, food. Sometimes I just did hungry with this and didn't do the other hungry, more, all done. So if they're giving you signs that they're all done, you can respond with like, oh, are you all done? And then they will pick up very quickly on these signs. So it's kind of a fun thing to use with your babies. Okay, moving on to what to feed. There's kind of 3 different categories of foods that I like to use, or types of foods. The first one would be purees, and I feel like that's a little more like classic, what we think of feeding babies. Back in the day, like everyone started with like the baby rice cereal. I like to make things a little more nutritious. I'll give some examples. Soft handheld foods. So most parents at this stage are familiar with the concept of baby-led weaning. And really what that is letting, again, baby just feed themselves handheld foods from the very beginning. Baby-led weaning's been around for a while now. I feel like the latest kind of research and then like boots on the ground, people actually feeding babies have kind of come to the conclusion that it's really helpful to do both. I feel like a lot of parents kind of stress out about the solid foods, and I'll show you some examples with safety and things like that. But what research has shown is that it's actually very important for baby to learn those skills, and I'll show you exactly what types of food and shapes to feed them so that it's a safe food for them. And then I encourage you to use purees, especially for foods that are supposed to be more purees. So my example would be like oatmeal or applesauce, things like that. And then family foods. I really want you pulling from what your family's already eating. So at the beginning, we might have to watch out for some allergens, but for the most part, I want you to pull from your plate, from your family, like dinner options, and kind of make it work for baby. So sometimes we might need to puree some stuff or cut some stuff in a different shape, or maybe cook a few things a little bit longer so that it's safe for baby and soft enough. But that's kind of ultimately the goal. I really, as far as like the first food, there's not one specific food I think you should start with. I tell parents to start with something they're excited about. Babies, food is more than just nutrition. It's like our cultural identity. And so start with something that is, important to you or is like seems fun to your family and your tradition of eating. And then I do have some examples on here that are good options. So avocado slices, bananas, roasted sweet potato wedges, homemade pancakes are a great option. Chicken drumstick, I know that sounds really kind of funny, but protein's going to be really important to get in our babies, and soft cooked animal protein's a great option, and then whole grain cereals. So either like a brown rice cereal or an oatmeal is a great option. So at 6 months old, baby actually can feed themselves. So I kind of wanted to show some pictures of what that looks like. So I kind of already showed this one. So baby can use a spoon. This baby is just kind of digging into this fruit and trying to get some of that. I like, you want them to be kind of in this good mood, happy, engaged. For the most part, they don't have a pincher grasp until 9 months, so they are going to be grabbing things with their fists. So I kind of like how this baby's doing that. This baby, too, is kind of showing, actually all of them, even this spoon, even how she's kind of grabbing that spoon, it's going to be the whole hand that we want to grab, or that's going to grab the food. Again, I do recommend doing a combo of like the handheld food for baby and the spoon. I really do. Even with the spoon is where adults can start to like kind of take over. So a couple tips for that. One is using 2 spoons, so you can hand 1 spoon to baby, and then you can have another one that you're kind of loading and getting ready, and then you can exchange. And what that does, it kind of takes the power struggle away of like who's in charge, who's holding the spoon, but baby can always kind of have a spoon if they're wanting that. If you are spoon feeding, I kind of like some of these pictures here. So like obviously this baby is like ready to rock and roll, wants that food in their mouth. I like this picture. We're going to assume this is dad here, but how he's like facing baby. They're engaged. He's paying attention, really letting baby communicate and send signals of like, I want more. I love how baby's like leaning in, like kind of ready to go. Same with this. I like this leaning in. And then here's kind of an example of the 2 spoons where baby has one and the adult's handing another one. Okay, a few other just kind of manage expectation things is what's really normal. This is a great example, this picture of the spoon. It's kind of a shorter, squattier spoon that babies, especially 6 to 9 months, can hold much easier. And then that you can see the spoon's kind of a nice scoop. It's not super shallow. You can get like a little bit more food on that. But in general, they won't eat very much. So up to 6, 7, 8 months old, over 90% of actual calories are still going to be coming from breast milk and formula. Between 11 and 16 months, still typically like half of their nutrition is coming from breast milk, formula, or if we've switched to cow's milk. So again, we're taking the pressure off of actually getting quantity in. Just like adults, people are different. Babies are going to be different. They're going to have different appetites. They're going to have different preferences of foods they like more than others. So again, just kind of letting baby decide that. It's going to be really messy. It's really, the main goal, especially at the beginning, is really just exploring and playing. Baby might not like everything, and that's okay. Again, we have preferences. I still want you to continue to offer breast milk or formula like normal. Baby will decrease as they need and based on their appetite. We're definitely born with like internal signals of when we're hungry and full. Most adults were taught to kind of ignore that, right? We eat for other reasons. And so it's really important that we encourage baby to kind of trust their intuition on this. I feel like with breast milk, it can be a little kind of confusing because you can't see how much they're eating. And so again, you need to trust that baby will eat when they're hungry and stop when they're not. They're going to breastfeed when they're hungry, and they're going to stop when they're kind of full, that they know that internally. And so let them, again, decide that. I mean, the same with formula. Formula is easier to track how many ounces they're eating, right? Unless you're putting breast milk into a bottle like all the time. It can be a little trickier to track. So sometimes if you're feeding with a bottle, that can be a little tricky too, because you might have this agenda of how many ounces they want to eat. And again, you know, we need to let them kind of be in charge of that. Okay, so a few safety things. When we start feeding, especially the handheld food, we get a little bit worried about gagging and choking. I will say there's a difference between these two. Choking is where we're going to block the airway. Most of choking in infants is actually done with household items. It's much more rare for it to happen with food. So just a little kind of like side note, it's time to around by 6 months, or when they're starting to pull everything to their mouth, which might be a little bit before 6 months, time to like baby proof the house. Anything that can fit through like an empty toilet paper roll is up for grabs as far as like a choking hazard. So making sure they don't have access to items of that size. And then as far as food, gagging is actually a really normal and protective kind of reflex. And it's kind of how they're going to choke. It's how they learn to kind of prevent choking. And it's a normal part of starting solids with baby. So the difference is gagging, there's going to be a lot of noise, there's going to be a lot of action. Baby's very active and engaged and trying to like dislodge, you know, this food from their throat. Their face typically turns more red. You hear, again, a lot of sounds. That's a good thing. So if baby starts gagging when they're eating, it's really important to stay calm, to be encouraging to the baby and kind of let them work it out. So sometimes even just like a hand on their back or their shoulder, just gently, and like looking them in the eye, like, you're okay, you know, you got this, and like let them kind of work it out. Choking is different. Choking is when we have something that's actually blocking the airway. The difference is there's not going to be much action. Baby's going to get really still. There's not going to be any sound because their airway is blocked. Lips maybe turn blue. Their face maybe turns more white. So it's very different than the action of gagging. Normally I play a video. I'm not going to do that right now because of time. So I'm going to let you look that up. So I really encourage you to go Google like gagging. I know it's kind of a weird thing, baby gagging, and like see what that looks like. I think it's really important for parents and caregivers to go watch that before they see it live with their baby, because it can be a little alarming. And so I want you to be familiar with what that looks like. And then you can also be able to determine the difference between gagging and choking. My other tip would be I highly recommend taking infant and child CPR first aid class. So I'm not qualified to talk about what to do if a baby is choking. So I really encourage you to take a class. Tahoe Forest, if you're local here, offers them almost monthly on Zoom. And so I give you our contact info at the end, and you can give us a call about the next class that's offered. But I know there's lots of other places to get that information. So a really important part of just being a caregiver at this life stage. Okay, I'm going to get on to what we're actually feeding. So let's start with purees. So soft baby spoons, I really like silicone. Here's a picture. I don't have specific brand names, but a picture of some that I like. So it's a little more stocky. You know, it's something that baby can grab easily. There's even some ridges on here, like for texture, so it's not as slippery. And then the spoon cup part is kind of a little bit deeper, so we can actually get some food there. It's really common to mix whatever we're pureeing. Let's say we're going to do potatoes with water, which is totally fine, but I do like to use some different liquids that add even more nutrition to baby's food. So you could mix it with breast milk, formula, bone broth, even some olive oil. It's going to add some healthy fat to their food, and so those are great options. And then again, we still want baby to be in charge. I really still encourage like homemade purees as much as possible. I know you go to the grocery store and then the baby section, there's aisles of like jarred baby purees. Those can be fine. I encourage to keep those, for on the go. And then when baby's at home, most of the time I really want real food, like living food. So taking what, again, is on your family's dinner plate, maybe not your actual plate, but what you've made for dinner, and pureeing that up. So you can even like use a fork or stick it in a blender or a small food processor, and you can kind of puree that up. We can also introduce multiple foods at one time. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the allergens, but so my example would be, let's say you're having spaghetti, and that's texture-wise too complicated for baby still. You could put the spaghetti, you could put the ground meat, the red sauce in a food processor and blend it and use that as a puree. Okay, soft finger foods. So if you do start with purees, I still really want you to introduce finger foods as quick as possible. I want to like escalate textures, a variety of textures as quick as possible with baby. So here's some pictures of foods that I really like. Again, it's going to be a little tricky for baby to hold some of these foods. So like this whole strawberry is going to be better than like a little slice. This is, I think, actually a peach, so it's pretty soft, like flesh there, but we're going to leave that skin on so baby can kind of have something to grasp. The broccoli, that's a little bit longer. This sweet potato, this would be a soft cooked like piece of chicken. Really love cutting the banana this way. Actual banana is super slippery, like all the little cartoons that are like, oh, don't slip on the banana. It's kind of true. It's really hard to hold. It will slip out of their hand. So leaving the end of the peel on like that gives them something to grab. This cucumber where we leave the skin on so they can kind of hold that and kind of gnaw in the middle of it. This would be like a mango slice, a piece of toast with some avocado on it. This is a great tool once we've introduced wheat to use bread as that kind of vessel to get some other healthy foods in. Ground meat into like patties is a great option. This is a kiwi again with that skin on. I really do like these slow cooked meats. So either like a rib, the drumstick from chicken, there is like a little pointy bone that you can reach in and grab out. And then after that, it's very safe for baby to be kind of just chewing on. I know one of my kids was obsessed with ribs when they were, that 6 to 12 months old. And so we would just hand him the whole rib and he could grab the little bone and then like chew on it. Here's a couple more pictures. I like this with the size is really helpful. So you do kind of want it like that index finger size. So again, like baby can grab it. And I like these pictures of baby like actually holding food. So kind of what it looks like is a great example of just grabbing with the whole hand. That skin is helping baby kind of grab that a little bit better. And here's another example of them just kind of bringing that. They typically don't have a ton of teeth, right? So they're really just kind of gnawing on it, getting the taste, getting the flavor. And it's very rare that they're actually going to end up choking on this. And again, that gag reflex is super strong at 6 months for a reason, to prevent that choking. Couple other options for finger foods. I love the sliced fruit, the home-cooked vegetables, homemade pancakes, and then you can slice them into strips. Rice balls, meatballs or meat patties, the slow-cooked meat or fish, you can leave it on the bone. Scrambled eggs or making like an omelet again and slicing it kind of like I was talking about with the pancakes. Pasta in the right size, so like long spaghetti noodles might not work, but shorter, squattier, kind of wider pasta shapes could be great. Healthy muffins, so I kind of like homemade things versus like a Starbucks muffin that would be more like cake, right? So that can be a great option, and slice that up. And then that whole grain toast with different spreads on it. So this example here has beans mashed on it, so it's a great option. And then I do love babies to eat beans, but they really cannot pick them up until that pincher grasp has been developed, which is usually around 9 months, sometimes closer to 10. But that's when they can start picking up small things. So this would be a great example around 9 months of introducing beans like this. Baby's not going to get a lot of quantity in to their mouth this way, but it's going to be a skill that they need to develop and work on. And this can be a great little activity for them to develop that. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about how to like pull from your family meal. So we really want to feed baby what you're already eating and maybe again modifying for safety and allergens. So there's no need to introduce foods one at a time except for the allergens. So all the vegetables, things like that, like we can go ahead and just offer multiple foods at one time. The more variety, the sooner, the better for baby. And then you can puree combo of foods or turn things into finger foods. Again, cook a little bit longer. Like if you're going to do the sweet potato wedges, you might want to make sure they're really soft and kind of cooked through so baby has a better chance of kind of being able to chew on that a little bit. So a couple examples, let's say for our family dinner, we're having roasted chicken with broccoli and sweet potatoes. For baby, I would say they can eat all of those foods right off the bat. I don't even see, there's no allergens in that. I want you to include all the herbs and spices, oils. I really love using olive oil for, majority of the cooking. Maybe the couple things I would watch out for is like a ton of added salt. Maybe add that at your plate on your own to taste. A bunch of added sugar would be another thing that I would maybe kind of want to limit. But a couple options with this meal. If you're at the very beginning and wanting to do pureed food, you could blend that all up in a blender or food processor. But this would also be a really easy meal to turn into finger foods for your baby. So I think I kind of showed pictures of all of these foods. So you could pull off part of the meat and kind of make it again in that index finger shape. You could also give them that drumstick. I want to peel the skin off, get that pointy bone out. Overcook the broccoli a little bit, but kind of leaving that bigger piece so they can grab it, overcooking those sweet potato wedges. But I would still add, the olive oil that you roasted in. If you add any herbs or spices, like keep that on for baby. That's all really good for them to be exposed to as early as possible. On the go, feeding can be a little bit more challenging. I kind of recommend, especially at the beginning of, being maybe not necessarily home, but being in a place where it's kind of comfortable and easy. And then when you start traveling on the go, I really love using more like silicone, stainless steel, sometimes glass. You have to be a little more careful. Obviously, glass can break, but there's some good products out there. I loved having leftovers, even freezing some. So if I needed on-the-go snack for baby when I wouldn't necessarily be eating something as well, I could just kind of grab and go with that. Freezing leftovers. I know a lot of times they recommend like the ice cube trays. I find those really small. So you can get trays. That's kind of a picture that are bigger, that maybe more have like a quarter of a cup size of food, so you can freeze like these larger chunks and then like thaw those out as you need. And then there's some store-bought pouches and some baby food that can be good to have kind of around for emergency, shelf-stable kind of snacks. Here's a few brands that I like. Again, I want to just double check the ingredients, but it's all real food would probably be like my number one thing. And then a lot of like the baby foods are like the pre-made baby foods at the grocery store are going to have kind of what I say, like the carbohydrates. So it's going to have like the cereals, the sweet potatoes, the fruit, things like that, which is great. Baby needs that. But it's going to be a little bit harder to get like protein and healthy fats in there, which again is super important for baby at this stage. Breast milk is a great source of protein and healthy fats. So we want to make sure that that's included. So looking at those labels, for products that maybe have some of that in it, or supplementing with something else that you're bringing, maybe some like leftover, like turkey patties sliced up, or some avocado or something like that. So that kind of leads me into like talking a little bit about like actual nutrition, right? Which is obviously important. Again, the goal is for baby to eat the widest variety of food and kind of as fast as possible. You really want to trust them to build that healthy relationship with food. That's how baby's going to get the best nutrition now and even like for a lifetime. Then I want to focus on that protein and fat just because the carbohydrates are easier to get, and again, breast milk's a great source of protein and fat, so we want to kind of continue that into with our solid foods. Protein and fat are going to be really important for growing. They're going to be growing really quickly still up till age 2, so really important. So as far as proteins and fat, I love that slow-cooked meat, the ground meat, patties, avocado, salmon, full-fat yogurt, eggs, beans. Those are all really good options. And then, as always, we all want to be eating fruits and vegetables and a huge variety. So introducing those. I get asked a lot, like, well, should I not introduce fruit yet because it will make them want sweet things? I don't have research that supports that's true. Actually, babies' taste buds for sweetness are more developed than other flavors at this age. It's pretty normal for them to like fruit, and that's okay. Fruits are very healthy food for them to be eating. But I do want to include vegetables as well and just continuing to offer that. Another thing, too, is you might offer something that baby doesn't like right away, and I want you to keep that on your options. So I want it to cycle back through. I want you to keep offering. We'll talk more about this in the toddler class, but sometimes it can take 10 to 20 exposures to a food for a baby or a toddler to accept it as something that's in their regular rotation or something that they like. So even if baby's not eating a ton of it, I still want things to be offered. So say you offer broccoli and they're totally uninterested, a couple days later, I want broccoli like back on their plate, just exposing them again, letting them get more comfortable with it. We're more comfortable with things that we're familiar with. So giving them a chance to get familiar with these foods and keep it in the regular rotation. Okay, there's a few nutrients I want to talk about as well that are really important. Iron, very important for growth. It helps make the protein in our blood called hemoglobin that carries oxygen throughout our body. So super important. Babies are born with some iron stores that typically kind of start to run out right around 6 months of age. So this is when we really need to make sure we're getting it in the diet. So I want you to be worrying about this at the first few introductions, but definitely in that first month, I want you to be mindful about providing high iron food sources. So a good goal once they're kind of up and running and eating a few times a day, I want you to offer 2 sources a day. So the next slide, I'll show you some examples. So there's 2 types of iron. There's animal-based iron, which is heme iron. This in general is more absorbed much more efficiently, and it's already kind of in what I call the active form, it's ready to go. And then we can also get iron from plants, but it's absorbed at a much lower rate. Our body has to convert it to the active form. And then vitamin C really helps improve absorption. So when we eat a plant-based form of iron, I really want you to serve a vitamin C source with it. You can serve a vitamin C source with the animal-based options as well. That's totally fine. It's just more important with the plant-based to increase that absorption. Typically, providers are going to be checking for iron levels around 9 months old. That's kind of a standard thing. I really want to encourage you that if they happen to be deficient and your provider recommends a supplement, I want baby on that supplement immediately because it's so, so important for growth. So as you supplement and get their levels up as quickly as possible, we can also talk about how to increase it in their diet so that we avoid kind of getting to that deficient stage later on. Okay, so here's some sources. All the animal proteins are going to be a great source, kind of the darker meat. So with poultry, it's going to be like that thigh, or the dark meat is going to be even higher, although a regular white meat, chicken breast will also have iron. One of the highest sources is going to be liver. I know that sounds a little crazy. It's not a super popular food right now. My one tip for that is, again, if we're really needing to get iron up in baby's diet, liver is going to be one of the most concentrated sources. You can buy ground beef that has liver kind of already in it, so you don't even really notice it. And you could make meatballs or like little ground meat patties and slice those up for babies. So this can be a really easy thing for a baby to eat. And then plant sources are going to be most whole grains. So this is where we would want like whole wheat bread instead of white bread. White bread will have iron added back into it, like fortified. So they will get some from that. In general, I find it easier to start with whole grains, and then eventually, they will have exposure to refined grains. It's much harder to go the other way around with babies, especially by the time they're toddlers. They're going to maybe be kind of stuck in their ways a little bit more and kind of what they're used to. So that whole wheat bread, oatmeal, brown rice, things like that. And then all the legumes, so beans, lentils are going to be really good sources, and then leafy greens, so trying to kind of sneak those in. And then as far as vitamin C sources, all citrus, tomatoes, strawberries, cauliflower, avocado, kiwi, broccoli, mango, bell pepper. So it's not just fruit, but there's a bunch of veggies that are really high vitamin C source too. So again, just kind of picking and choosing, grab something from the iron column, grab something from the vitamin C column, and have those kind of ready to go for babies. I get a lot of questions about omega-3. It is polyunsaturated fat that's really important for brain development, eye health in general. I would say for the most part, it is transferred through breast milk. So if mom is eating foods high in these omega-3 fatty acids or taking a supplement, then baby's going to be getting some. So if you're breastfeeding past 6 months, that could be really important for you to look at your diet. Some infant formula does have some DHA. There's kind of two omega-3s, DHA and EPA. So just for the sake of time, I can't get into like the nitty-gritty on this. But I will say, in general, I always want to start with food sources first. So making sure that you're offering some of these fatty fish as soon as possible is really important. Fish is on our allergen list, which we're going to get to next, so we're going to talk about that. But getting this in baby's diet as soon as possible is really important. So the foods that are high in these omega-3s are going to be salmon. It's going to be all the fatty fish. So salmon, mackerel, sardines, anchovies, and herring. There are some plant sources as well. Most people are familiar with like the flax, the chia seed, the walnuts. It's a different form of omega-3, and our bodies, again, have to kind of convert that to a more active form. We know that not everyone's very efficient in that. So unless your family is vegan or there's an allergen or something like that, we can't eat these fatty fish. I really prefer the fish over those plant sources. Those plant foods are super healthy. You can absolutely add those into baby's diet. They should be added into baby's diet. But as far as relying on like a really good source, it's going to be the fatty fish. We can start supplementing. I, for the most part, do that a little bit more on an individual basis. Salmon's a great food for a baby to start eating. It soft in texture. You can do just like a grilled fillet. You can also get salmon patties. You can also do canned salmon, canned sardines. They're all really great options for like finger foods for baby too. The next nutrient I get questions about is vitamin D. So vitamin D, it's actually a hormone that our body makes when our skin's exposed to sun. The problem is we actually don't let our babies in the sun too much because their skin's so sensitive. We don't want them to burn all the things, right? And so it is pretty important for babies to have a vitamin D supplement. Vitamin D is really important because it helps increase the absorption of calcium. They have a high need for calcium because they're growing in bulk. Their bones are growing at a pretty rapid rate up until 2 years old. So it's recommended that babies under 12 months of age, so starting really close to after birth, get around 400 IUs of vitamin D a day. Vitamin D is not passed through breast milk very efficiently. It depends on which formula you're using, but for the most part, I don't think there's very high levels in most formulas. I really recommend vitamin D drops, vitamin D3, easy just to add into what baby's eating and drinking on a daily basis. Okay, want to get into allergens. So since babies, we wait until 6 months old to introduce solids, their digestive tract's more developed. So we really want to get into allergens really quickly. We want to introduce them early and often. I will say this is something that's changed over the last decade. We used to wait until closer to 12 months, but now research shows the sooner, the better. So I have a list of the top allergens that we want to introduce these foods one at a time. So egg, peanut, dairy. We do want to wait on cow's milk until after 12 months, but we can do yogurt and cheese before. Soy, wheat, fish, shellfish, like shrimp, tree nuts, like almonds, walnuts, and then sesame has kind of recently been added to this. So if the food's not on this list, you can introduce it, and you can introduce multiple foods at one time. Again, the biggest variety, the soonest is kind of what we're going for. But for this list, I really recommend getting into it kind of immediately, right away, the first 2 weeks that you're feeding. But I want you to do them one at a time. So let's say we're going to introduce eggs. I want you to introduce eggs once a day for 3 days. I'm going to show you a checklist that kind of gives an example. So I have a whole handout, but I can't really hand that out in this context. So I just kind of put an example on here. So I'm going to say I'm going to start with eggs. You don't have to start with eggs. You can do these in any order that you want. But maybe then I'll make an omelet and slice it into those strips. I could do a hard-boiled egg and slice it maybe into quarters. I could do a scrambled egg and kind of put it in that shape that baby can grab. And I'm going to introduce it on day 1. I'm going to pay attention to baby for a few hours and see if there's any signs. We'll talk about the signs in a second. If there's nothing, then I've checked the box, it's good. I want the next day, I want to do the same thing. I typically just recommend using the same food to keep it really simple. Again, I'm going to watch for signs of an allergen. If there's no reaction, I'm checking the box. If that's good, then I'm going to go to day 3. I'm going to introduce it again. If that's good, I'm checking the box. And now egg is just going to be in the regular rotation of food. I'm not going to worry about it. It's kind of a green light, good to go for eggs. I will say most of the time, baby's not going to react on day 1. I'd say majority of the time it's on day 2. Every once in a while it's on day 3. And then once I've spent 3 days on this, then I can go to the next one. I could move to peanut butter or peanuts. I have some examples here of like what you could use for all of these foods. These aren't all the allergens. Again, I want to go through all of these as like a little checklist. So you could get a little journal, a little worksheet, and just kind of keep track of that. So as far as symptoms go, we really want to look out for a lot of like skin kind of issues. So hives, any kind of spotting, a lot of times they'll get it on the kind of their chest or their back, red patches on their arms and face. So you'll see it's almost like an eczema type looking thing on their cheeks. You can see it even on their arms, kind of even the inner arms. A lot of times you'll see it there. With introducing new foods, sometimes right around their lips will get red. That's not necessarily what we're looking for. That can kind of be okay. It's more like the hives kind of, it definitely looks a little bit more like allergic reaction. Any kind of swelling. I will say it's very, very rare for babies when they've been introduced to a food for the first time to have an anaphylactic reaction, which is a true allergic reaction where it closes, there's swelling that ends up closing airway. That's where you would use like an EpiPen. So we're not super concerned about that part of like the safety. So we really just do want to look out for kind of these red patches, these hives. Every once in a while you can get more symptoms, kind of upset stomach, diarrhea, throwing up. Those are more rare. So if you're not seeing any of these signs when you introduce a food, then I want you to move on and keep working down that allergen list. I want you to work down that allergen list kind of as soon and early as possible. If you do see a sign, So let's say you introduce eggs, the first day seems okay, then second day they get kind of the red cheeks. I want you to stop giving them eggs. I want you to make a note of it. I want you to call your pediatrician, tell them that you think you've had your baby's had an allergic reaction. They will either see you or they'll make a referral to an allergist where they'll do further allergy testing. They won't do allergy testing unless baby actually reacts to it. So it's really important to keep track of it and take notes as to what the symptom is. Let's say baby has that reaction to eggs. It's, at least around here, it's going to take a while to get in to see an allergist. So I want you to continue to work down that allergen list. So leave eggs out, but keep going down that list and taking notes. If you wait until you see an allergen, it could maybe be a couple months. And now, again, we've missed this window of early and often. So it's really important to expose baby to the rest of those allergen foods and kind of go through them in the system. My only other comment would be if you have an allergen, that any parents have an allergen, we might want to be a little bit more cautious. Again, I would say that this is more on an individual level and not something we can really get into in this context today, but that will help. So there's really good science behind this too. There's studies that show waiting past 11 months to introduce these foods, baby is more likely to have an allergen. So again, early and often is very important. Okay, I'm keeping an eye on the time. I want to just show some choking hazards, so watching out for some foods. I have kind of this list here. So whole nuts, I'd rather do a nut butter. I would say that's can be actually another choking hazard is large clumps. So really making sure it's kind of thin, or maybe it's mixed into oatmeal, stuff like that. Popcorn, small round fruit like grapes, candy, gum, chips, hard veggies, hard fruit. So a hard apple slice, probably not a good choice for kind of early on. And you'll watch as baby's skills develop as far as when you can kind of escalate that texture. Raw leafy greens can get kind of stringy and get caught. Hot dogs are kind of a famous choking thing. Dried fruit, again, it's that kind of tougher texture. It's not that that's a necessarily unhealthy food. Ice cubes, even grabbing frozen fruit out of the freezer can be a good option, but making sure it's completely thawed through. Marshmallows, really hard cheese. Another thing I like to mention is if you're microwaving or heating up food, say that you have it in the fridge or the freezer, but really making sure you stir that so there's not hot spots within it, especially the microwave, that can create some hot spots that we want to kind of avoid. And then limiting honey and cow's milk until 12 months. Those are really important. In general, I want babies eating kind of real food. We're going to limit that salt, sugar, artificial sweeteners as much as possible before 12 months. And then I want all the herbs and spices, all the flavors that your family's used to, that your family enjoys. Okay, fluids. Everyone wants exactly how much should I be breastfeeding or formula feeding. I'm not giving you a number. I want baby to decide. I want you to kind of offer it as you normally do. And baby will give you cues as to when they are kind of done or when they're not interested. And so really respecting that and listening to it. You can offer water during meals. A few sips is enough. They're going to get most of their liquid under 12 months, again, from that breast milk and formula. After 12 months, offer water throughout the day, just kind of like you would normally as an adult. It's recommended that we use open cups or straws. This is from occupational therapists as far as developing those fine motor skills, limiting these sippy cups as much as possible. I kind of laugh as a parent about this recommendation because giving a 6-month-old an open cup, we all know what's going to happen with that, can be very messy. So kind of doing your best, but we do want them to develop that skill of being able to sip actual liquid out of a cup. Saving our bottle for breast milk or formula only, and not putting juice or other liquid in it. That we want to move to a cup or a straw as soon as possible. And then in general, I recommend that limiting juice, offering real fruit instead. That's going to be a healthier option. Okay, my last couple things here is I want to talk a little bit about what I call the division of responsibility. So I've touched on this a little bit as far as like letting baby be kind of responsible and in charge of what's going on and how much they're eating. We'll get into this more in like the toddler class, but there's very good research on, again, this feeding dynamic and a healthy way to do it. So again, baby, you want to invite them to the table when you're eating, but they get to be in charge of if they eat at all, what they eat, and how much. Very, very important. And then adults, you get to be in charge of like when they're eating, what you're going to offer. So at the beginning, obviously want, again, the biggest variety of foods. When we get down the road a little bit, I typically like to make sure I'm offering at least one thing that I know they like, especially if I'm introducing like new foods. So baby has an option to actually get some food and eat something they enjoy while also trying something that's maybe different or maybe that's something that they've been a little bit more hesitant about. So what to offer. This also includes like the quality of the food, the variety of food. You get to watch for safety at the beginning, and then you get to be in charge of making mealtime pleasant, so making that time just a positive experience. If you want more information, the Ellen Satter website has a ton of information. You can kind of Google that. And again, we'll go into more detail on this with toddlers. I feel like with 6 to 12 months old, this is like fairly easy to kind of get in the swing of things. Toddlers have maybe stronger opinions, and it can be a little bit trickier, where we get a little bit more picky eating. So a lot of adults kind of want to take control in different ways. So this can become a bigger deal then. So we'll get more into that in the toddler feeding class. So bottom line, I know I feel like I'm kind of rushing through information. I'm almost at like my hour here, so I want to kind of wrap up. But I will encourage you to have fun, keep it simple. It's going to be really fun, like bonding with baby. Be okay with that mess. Just be prepared for it. Baby's not going to eat quantity a lot of food. Really important to continue with breast milk or formula until 12 months old. And then again, just trusting baby. So they have that instinct of when they're hungry and when they're full, and letting them kind of be in the driver's seat of that. I just want to say thanks for joining us today. If you need more support or have questions, please reach out to us. Again, the Tahoe Forest Health System, specifically the Tahoe Forest Center for Health. Our phone number is on here, our email is on here if you want more information for other classes that we do, or want to meet with a dietitian if you have individual needs or concerns. We're happy to support you in that way.